A cornerstone is a fundamental piece of a building. Well, when it comes to the Detroit Lions, they have several cornerstone players. The question is, who are the biggest cornerstones of the franchise? We're going to talk about it in this debate episode, folks, so let's have fun with it, and don't you dare go away.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions fans, and welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. So here's the thing, folks. I decided let's do something fun today. Let's have a fun episode today. Not necessarily where, we're going after anybody. Not necessarily, where we're calling out somebody for something stupid they said or some controversial ranking, something like that. Let's actually have a little bit of fun with this. Because I thought, you know what? When you take a look at the Detroit Lions, especially at this point now in this juncture in history, the Lions have a lot of important players. They have a lot of key pieces on this roster. And I started thinking about it in a sense of a building. And it's like, when you're constructing a building, the biggest pieces of the building, other than the foundation that the building itself is resting on, are the cornerstones, which in essence what a cornerstone is a stone. It is a piece of the building that connects the walls together so that way, hey, you actually have the ability for a building to be erected. Well, here's the thing. I thought, hey, who are the cornerstones of the Detroit Lions? Now, I could be very specific and say, hey, it's this, 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 this. And I could leave it to just, hey, you know what? When we're talking about a building, typically you have only 4 sides. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to be a little bit more fun today. I'm going to have a little bit more of a jovial kind of idea when it comes to this, because it's kind of funny, like I've said, when you take a look at how the Lions are as a team right now, they have a lot of foundational players. Again, we've heard Dan Campbell talk about the core players. We've heard him talk about players that are absolutely essential to this team. And there once was a time where the Detroit Lions foundation, if you will, the players that they viewed kind of as their foundational players, it rested upon a very hollow, very rotten foundation because they weren't foundational players, because either they were not right for that job or there were none in the first place. But like I said, now you take a look at the Lions of today, they are one of the strongest teams in the NFL. They boast a deep roster with exceptional talent at virtually every single position. And when you take a look at the talent that the Lions have, it is a small wonder thinking about how the Lions have actually been able to amass all that talent into one roster under one building. But obviously, if you're a Lions fan, you have seen how we have done it over the last 3 years. But like I said, there is so much talent. It's like, well, which one of those players, how many of those players could we actually call as cornerstone players? Which of those players are absolutely above the rest when it comes to, being fundamental players for this roster? So I know for some people that might seem like a rather silly question. But actually, when you really start thinking about it, you really start actually diving in, depending upon the opinion you may have or who you ask, you're going to get a very diverse answer in, who you think might be a fundamental player, who you might think is a cornerstone player. And so that's why I decided, hey, you know what? Let's have a good episode today where we debate about it, but not necessarily get, all hot and heated under the collar about it. So that's why I decided let's have the episode. So, I decided that if we're going to have this conversation, there has to be a couple of parameters when we're asking the question. And the only parameters I could come up with were 2. The first parameter is this. The list is only going to include 5. And the reason why I said only 5 is because, well, I could go on and on for a number of different people that I could consider cornerstone players. But I decided, you know what? Let's just keep it to a minimum of 5. Let's just keep it to a maximum of 5. Pardon me, I had that backwards. Because I don't want this list going on forever. And that was the first parameter that I had. The second parameter that I had is that they have to be on the roster, but they can't currently be rookies. Because if they haven't played, I can't make any judgment calls for them. So it's like, okay, they have to be on the roster, and they can't be rookies. So it's like, okay, obviously guys like Terrion Arnold, Enos Rakestraw, and all those guys we just drafted, they can't be a part of this conversation. No, nothing against them. It's just like, listen, we haven't seen them play yet, so I can't make a judgment call. So, with that having been stated as the parameters, let's take a look at who are the Cornerstone Lions. Who are the cornerstones of this team? Let's debate. So, I then said, okay, let's take a look at number 1 here. Now, some people would think that I'm going to just go with players. But again, when you're talking about Cornerstone Detroit Lions, you have to start at the top. And for me, the number 1 Cornerstone Lion is the management team, the management squad. Because I know that's not a specific one person. It's a group of people. You can literally talk about guys like, Chris Spielman. You can talk about Sheila. You can talk about Rod Wood. You can talk about freaking Brad Holmes. You can talk about Dan Campbell. All of those guys factor into, all those people, pardon me, all of them factor in to how this Lions roster has been formed into what it is right now. Because they are extremely important to the Lions front office and current management team. Without them, the Lions that we know today do not exist. And so, like I said, whether it's Sheila as the owner, whether it's Holmes and Campbell as GM and head coach, whether it's Rod Wood or Chris Spielman, it doesn't matter. All of them are extremely vital as to the role that they play in the management squad to be able to make sure that the Lions are where they are today. Making sure that all the people that we have in the building on this roster are here because they all work together to make sure that the Lions are where they're at. So that's Cornerstone number 1. Now we get to Cornerstone player number 2, or Cornerstone Lion number 2, pardon me. Number 2 is Penei Sewell. I'm sorry. There's no way that this list could have any other Lion on it but Penei Sewell if you were going to have this kind of conversation. If you were to take Penei Sewell off this list, it would be a faulty list. Penei Sewell has to be on this list. Because think about it. When it comes to cornerstones, there is literally none that is bigger, quite literally, or more vocal than that of Penei Sewell. Think about this, folks. Penei Sewell was the very first pick of the Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell era. He was their number 1 overall pick in freaking the 2021 draft. He was their first pick. So it's like, dude, that right there already makes him a cornerstone because it's like, hey, he's their first guy that they ever selected. But then when you start taking a look at what Penei Sewell has done ever since he's been with the Detroit Lions, his importance, his ability to hold down the fort as a lineman, you can't understate it. You overstate it. Pardon me. I'm so excited about Penei Sewell. But for me, it's like, dude, he came out of college as the best offensive line draft prospect in a very, very long time. But when you take a look at what Penei Sewell has done over the last 3 years, he has now become one of the best offensive linemen in the entirety of the NFL. Arguably I would say top 3 offensive tackle in the NFL, just by how he plays. Penei Sewell has literally become, over the last 3 years, just the embodiment of what this Detroit Lions team is. He is all about what Dan Campbell's culture is about. He is all about hard work. He is all about putting in the effort. He is all about being committed to the team. And when you think about it, I still get chills when I think about this. The freaking phone call with freaking Brad Holmes calling Penei Sewell, and Penei Sewell's on the couch, he's crying, and then after they get off the phone, freaking Brad Holmes, he just absolutely loses it because they were so excited to get the guy that they wanted. That's the stuff of legends right there. And for Penei Sewell, the fact that he got the contract that he did, now being the highest paid tackle in the NFL, there was a good reason for that because he is that kind of a player. Not only in terms of the rest of the NFL, but for the Detroit Lions. So definitely another Cornerstone Detroit Lion right there. Cornerstone Detroit Lion number 3, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You definitely knew I was going to leave him off this list. Absolutely was not going to leave him off this list. Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of those guys that when we drafted him, no one thought he was going to kind of quite turn out what we had. We kind of expected that he was going to be a good, solid player, but I don't think anybody save St. Brown himself was looking at the situation like, oh yeah, I'm going to become one of the best wide receivers in the NFL in a very, very short time. Because think about it. Everybody now by this point has heard the story of when freaking, Amon-Ra St. Brown got drafted. First and foremost, he didn't want to come to Detroit. He wanted to go either play with his brother or go somewhere else, like play with the Chiefs and Pat Mahomes. But he gets drafted here to Detroit. He gets drafted in the 4th round. So he's already coming in, absolutely peeved off. He's got a chip on his shoulder. But Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell knew what they were getting when they got with Amon-Ra St. Brown. They knew he was a hard worker. They knew he was going to come in and he was going to devote himself to the craft. And what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell knew was that, like, hey, as we continue to build this roster, as we continue to build up everything, we're going to have a program that everybody wants to play for. And that's exactly what happened. Amon-Ra St. Brown maybe didn't want to get drafted here, but now he's become such a foundational, such a fundamental piece. He loves being in Detroit. And the fact that the Lions gave him the contract that they gave him, that's a further endorsement of that. He is a perfect embodiment of the grit mindset. He is a perfect embodiment of the values that make up the team. I mean, for crying out loud, you watch the Netflix freaking show, the receiver that's out right now, the guy had his oblique muscle tore straight from the bone, and yet he still played the entire season. No complaints. Dude, talk about gritty as hell. Talk about, that is a Dan Campbell player right there. That is a true Detroit Lion. That is a cornerstone player. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So for me, it's like, there's no way you could have a conversation like this without having Amon-Ra St. Brown on the list. Absolutely none whatsoever. And when you take a look at how every single year that Amon-Ra St. Brown has been with the Detroit Lions, he has continually gotten better, whether in terms of how he runs routes, how he catches passes, also in terms of his statistical progression. He has easily become not only one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, but he's going to be the top wide receiver in Detroit for years and years to come. There's no doubt about it. And not only is he a top wide receiver here in Detroit, he's a leader. He's one of those foundational cornerstone players. No ifs, ands, or buts. Cornerstone Detroit Lion number 4, Jared Goff. I don't care what the Goff haters think. I don't care what the rest of the NFL thinks, whether it's analysts or ESPN people, I don't give a damn. Because the way I look at it is how Dan Campbell talked about Jared Goff after the freaking Rams playoff game. Jared Goff, you're freaking good enough for Detroit. That was it. That was all I needed to hear to fully put that in my book. Because it's like, listen, I have been on Jared Goff's bandwagon probably longer than anybody else, if you think about it. But when I finally heard Dan Campbell say that, I was like, okay, here. Not only is he looking at Goff as the franchise quarterback, but he's looking at him as a definitive cornerstone of the franchise based on 2 characteristics. One, the circumstances and how Jared Goff came to Detroit and how he persevered through it. Think about it. When Jared Goff came to Detroit, there were not a lot of people that were excited or blasting fanfare for him coming here. There were a lot of people that were like, oh, we're getting him? Oh, we're getting a bridge quarterback? And I was like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. This guy is something special. There's a reason why Brad Holmes drafted him. There's a reason why Brad Holmes advocated for him. There's a reason why Brad Holmes traded for him. And the second thing that also, was a characteristic that, in my opinion, makes him a cornerstone player is the fact that since coming to Detroit, few other quarterbacks can match Goff's production. Few other quarterbacks can state some of the things that Goff has been able to do here in Detroit. How many other quarterbacks that have been in Detroit have had the success that Jared Goff has had? Virtually almost none, save maybe Bobby Lane. How many quarterbacks can say, hey, I've got 30,000 passing yards and less than 100 interceptions ever? Nobody. Jared Goff's the only one that can do that. There's only 2 other quarterbacks in NFL history that have a longer pass attempt streak without interception than him. Jared Goff is a special player, and Goff has both earned the title of the franchise quarterback here in Detroit with the contract extension that he got, and also the leader. Because think about it, Jared Goff is one of those guys that is a leader that everybody looks up to on that roster. They look at him and they're like, hey, he is our captain. He is our leader. And the fact that the Lions made him the highest paid Detroit Lions player of all time further is a significant point of saying that he is a cornerstone player. You do not give a guy a $212 million contract if he is not a cornerstone player. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So, that's player or cornerstone Detroit Lion number 4. Cornerstone Detroit Lion number 5. This was a hard one to come up to because there's a couple of guys I could have thrown in here. But I honestly think that cornerstone Detroit Lion number 5 has to be Aiden Hutchinson. It has to be him. because it would be hard to imagine the Detroit Lions without Hutch on the roster. Because you just have to look at Hutch's story. You just have to look at his background. As a pure Michigander, think about it. He was born in Michigan, he went to U of M as his college, and then he was drafted to the Detroit Lions. Michigan is his life. That is where he is. That is his identity. He is a Michigander. He is a U of M alumni. He is a Detroit Lion. He literally fits the entire embodiment of that whole group of being a Michigander and a Detroit Lion. Hutch is the quintessential all-American dream story that has come true in every way possible and in the best way possible. Because think about it, Hutch coming out of college was viewed as arguably the best prospect in the 2022 NFL Draft. The Lions, thankfully, got him at pick number 2 because the Jags thought, hey, we're going to go somewhere else and we're going to draft this other guy, which at this point has become nothing more than a bust in comparison to what we've gotten with Hutch. So it's like, hey, you know what? Thank you, Jags, for once again making a stupid mistake. Thank you once again for allowing us to get the freaking golden child from freaking U of M that was here in Michigan who stated he wanted to play for us. I'm so thankful for that. And since we have gotten Hutch, he has done nothing but work his literal tail off. Think about it. He comes in, he gets 9.5 sacks his very first year. The next season, he gets freaking 11 sacks. Over the first 2 years that he's been in the NFL, he has more interceptions I don't know if he has more interceptions over the last 2 years, but in his rookie year, he had more interceptions than freaking Sauce Gardner, who was the top cornerback in that draft. Think about it. Since he came into the freaking NFL, Hutchinson has just been a terror for quarterbacks, and he's a verifiable one-man wrecking crew. I mean, dude, if you take Hutch off of that defensive line, you take Hutch out of that freaking defense, it is a completely different team. It is a completely different vibe. It is a completely different just whole makeup. And you have to think about it. I just mentioned how the last 3 Cornerstone Detroit Lions, Goff, St. Brown, and Sewell, they all got new deals. And St. Brown and Sewell got new deals, and they were from the 2021 NFL draft class. So they're going to make sure that their longevity in Detroit remains. Hutch is going to be right around the corner. I have no doubt about that. Hutch is in line to get a big contract. And Hutch wants to stay here. Hutch wanted to get drafted here. So I have no doubt that Hutchinson is a Cornerstone Detroit Lion. Now, like I said, those are my 5. There are other guys that I consider foundational players. There are other guys that I consider important core players. But it's like, dude, I can't include them all on this list. I just can't. Otherwise, it would just be a list of just everybody almost. So I had to be like, who are the most important guys? And in my opinion, these 5 are the most important. Because without any one of them, you're not probably going to have the rest of them. But anyway, having said all that, I'm going to end the episode here. Let's keep the debate, let's keep it respectful. Let's not let, passions and feelings go completely off the rails here. But I understand that we're very, very passionate about our Lions. I'm just simply saying, if you have a disagreement, please be respectful. But having said that, I'm going to end the episode and say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to watch the next episode. Also encourage you all to do one of these 3 things: like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and not had a chance to do so, again, I highly encourage you all to subscribe. But I also encourage you all, please, to make sure you hit that bell notification icon that's at the bottom of the page, so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Again, we're always getting more subscribers, but we want to make sure you guys turn on that notification icon, so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. I also encourage y'all, please, to share the content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. The more we share it, the greater the channel grows, spreads, and has a better reach. And with that being said, to everybody, I hope y'all are enjoying your day. I hope y'all got something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. Hope y'all enjoyed the content. And with that, God bless, and until the next time we meet, I'll see y'all in the next episode.